Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. I'm joined here in studio this week at the number 38 with a special guest. We have Luis Rodriguez. Luis, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, Jordan. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Luis, real quick before we get too much into the thick of things, where can people follow you?
You can give me a follow on Instagram. That's at Lujitsu. That's Lu Jitsu. That's JITSU for life. Follow me on Instagram. Keep you updated on everything going on in CJJC, all our CJJC events, getting matched up and whatnot.
We're going to be talking a little bit more with the CJJC show this weekend, recapping last week with the UFC, talking a little bit of this week's card, some more current events in the process. We're also going to have the big Yins on the line here in just a little bit, talking about his matchup this weekend on the CJJC show. But real quick, guys, want to give a shout out to our crew here at the Mile High Sports Network. There is no shortage of headlines and content that is going around for all of the core four in the sports world out there right now. You have CU just re-signing Coach Prime to a contract extension. You have the NFL in the offseason swing, but in full ramp-up of talks of the Combine, Pro Days, pre-draft talk, so on and so forth there. You have the NHL and the NBA ramping up toward the postseason. You have Major League Baseball kicking things off with opening day going down this Friday at home for the Rockies, which we're going to talk a little bit more about that in one of our breaks. But that is a watch party happening here at number 38 on Friday. So come down and enjoy the festivities. Make sure that you check out Mile High Sports across the board, whether that is the magazine, online, the podcast side of things, merch drops, everything in the mix for MHS here. Smash that like, share, and subscribe wherever possible. Real quick here, going to burn through the Colorado rundown before we get to the weekend recap here. We have a couple of shows that we want to hit. We have obviously CJJC coming up this weekend. Not going to spend a ton of time on that right now just because we're going to be spending a lot more of the program on it later on. You have Sparta in a couple of weeks on the 18th with a striking event at the Eclipse Event Center. Then I believe the MMA event got moved to May 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. That's the date that got shifted to. And then following that, we also have 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series making the return on April 26th at the Stampede. There's going to be about 20 fights right now scheduled as far as what's on the bill right there. Lots of pro full rules Thai bouts. So be sure to be there. Check that out. That is going to be the 26th at the Stampede. Luis, now we're going to talk real quick this weekend recap for the UFC fight night in Mexico City before we get to Josh Fremd on the line. We had a showdown in the flyweight division in Mexico City. You had Brandon Moreno getting the nod 49-46 over Urseg. Now, I kind of talked about this last week on the show that this was a real conundrum of a position for Urseg to be in. He got a fast-tracked push just based off of the landscape of the division and Pantoja having wins over everybody in the top. He gets a title fight probably a little bit earlier than he would have normally as far as climbing the ranks of the division, but he fought and lost two competitive fights to former champions or former champions in Pantoja and Moreno. Did get finished by Kai. Outside of the fight to Kai, they were competitive fights. Again, 2 5-round wars with gritty, grizzled vets. But now he's on the heels of 3 in a row. It's kind of the question of what do you do with Urseg now at this point? And this is the cautionary tale of what can happen if you get pushed too fast too soon.
I agree. I think, that division is been really active over the last couple of years. I think everybody's basically fought each other. So it's no surprise to me that they made such a quick push for Ursig. Yeah, man, tough couple losses in a row. Definitely puts you in a position where I wouldn't necessarily say he's top 5 after that last one. Yeah, I think Ursig needs to kind of step back. It kind of looked to me like in this fight specifically, he didn't necessarily have a whole lot in his toolbox. And I feel like, when you're preparing for back-to-back, tough guys, I think it's really hard to be able to work on anything new or be able to expand your game. So I think maybe taking a step back, doing some more training, A tune-up fight might be a good idea, but that also just kind of puts us overall in a position for the flyweight division. What's going on in the title picture, what's going on for the #1 contender spot, etc. I'm excited to see how that plays out. I have my take on it, but more so, yeah, it kind of just puts the division in a pretty weird state for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I say, there's lots to be thought of there. So many different directions that the division can go, even though it is sort of a stalemate at the top. It just makes you question what's next for Brandon Moreno, because he has 3 losses to Pantoja. He has 2 wins over Kai Kara France. There is the 0-1-1 situation with Brandon Royval. Does this set up with both him and Royval kind of on the outside looking in? Like, I've long since said that I think in the flyweight division, it's those 3 and everybody else.
Absolutely.
I think that it's Ben Pantoja and the 2 Brandons who are definitely the cream of the crop there. But the thing is against just being fair. And one of them is one of my close friends, someone who I've spent a considerable amount of time with, but he's 5-0 against both of them. It's tough to sell that fight when you're talking about business, shareholder interest, keeping people just wanting to be, I guess, interested, wanting to follow along with that division. It's tough to sell when Pantoja is just decimating everybody in the process. He has multiple wins over Kai as well. He has a win over Manel Kape. That just, that makes you understand why the Kyoji Horiguchi re-signing was something that was needed to be had. We're going to burn through a couple of these again real quick just before we get to Josh. But you had Manuel Torres, all credit to Manuel Torres, all blessings to Drew Dober. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Respect to you, my man. Edgar Chairez, I feel like, had the feel-good story of the day. He made his return with the rear naked choke victory. He was emotional as post-fight speech, saying that last year he needed to have a surgery that he didn't have the money for. His grandpa, who was like a father to him, sold his house so he could get the operation. His grandpa's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he did say that he had a front row seat from heaven to watch him get the win. So that was kind of one of those oh man, hits you right in the heartstrings and the feels as far as that goes. Raul Rosas Jr. gets the win. It was a much harder fight than I think that he had anticipated. Morales, a gamey vet, had his moments, but just came up short once again. Shout out to David Martinez for getting the nod in his UFC debut. He made history as he and his sister Melissa Martinez are the first ever brother and sister duo in the UFC. We've had brothers. We've had sisters. We've had husband and wife. We've had wife and wife, husband and husband.
We've had dad and son.
Dad and son. Your move now, Peyton Talbot and Jeff Molina. Yeah. Well, whether or not Jeff Molina gets reinserted, that's a whole different story. But yeah, also another one that we have to hit on before we get to Josh. Our friend of the program, Lupi Godina, probably had one of the most viral and relatable moments that we've seen in a fight in between round 2 and 3. And Danny, I don't know if you caught this and if this made it your way on the feed, but Lupi, unfortunately, was caught with a hot mic and directly on camera in between rounds saying that she had to take a dump. Now, we've seen it from people like Derek Lewis, and when Derek Lewis says it, I think it's just kind of implied and it's expected. Yeah. You have a big fat heavyweight who talks about his love for, greasy food. It's expected that guy's got to make a boo-boo whenever he has to. But
I've heard him say he literally will eat his meal, his wings, whatever the case is. He'll eat it right before the fight.
Dan Henderson talked about how he was eating chicken in the warm-up room.
Unreal.
Absolutely insane. But just again to talk about that with Lupi, Montezuma's revenge was real down there in Mexico City for a lot of the people involved with the card. It wasn't just her. Joe Pyfer ended up pulling off of the card because of being sick. And then John Anik said that he was brewing a batch of hot pozole sitting on the broadcast desk. So it was definitely something that was not just her. Multiple people were affected in the process. Want to give a quick shout out before we head on the break to our boy in Markel Medeiros. Markel gets his win over Austin Thud Hubbard. Respect to Thud Hubbard, a gamey veteran who, again, is in the mix with anybody and any single fight. Just came up short in this particular matchup. But again, Markel Medeiros, young prospect with a lot of potential out there. Moving along, though, now we have, I believe, on the line with us right here, Do we have the big ins, Josh Fremd?
What's up, Curtsy?
Josh, what is up, my man? How you doing, big dog?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm doing well seeing that caterpillar on your face.
You know, I got it inspired by you. You know, I saw a big red fluffy caterpillar during baseball this last season, and I got inspired. You know, we talked about it over the fall, and then last week, Vince's fight week just gave me the inspiration to completely pull the trigger on it.
There we go. All right, we're all joining the Colorado vibe, eh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, big dog, you've got a matchup this weekend on our CJJC 25 GrappleCon card. Folks, if you don't know already, you can follow Josh at Josh Fremd MMA. But Josh, UFC veteran, he's going to be on our CJJC card this weekend. What are your thoughts on getting back into the mix of competing? It's been a little while since we've seen you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I got the butterflies again. It's been a minute, and I got to call the first CJJC cage card with you. So that was always, a thought process of me wanting to do it. So I got the opportunity, and I'm excited to go out and grapple for a bit.
Now, what did this process look like for you? You know, I mean, obviously, you've made the walk in front of, sold out crowd, 1,700 or 17,000 plus people, whatever, yada, yada, in the process. You fought on Noche cards, all these just massive fanfare events and major fights in the process. But again, all things considered, recent adversity, all factored in, what did that look like for you from a mental standpoint and then also from a preparation standpoint?
There we go. Okay. Yeah, like you said, the last time I actually competed was in Ball Arena in a huge stadium with like a bunch of people. It really hasn't factored into my thought process at all. Like I just wanted to get back to compete because, I still feel like I got a ton of tread on the tires with some unfortunate circumstances that I'll address later on down the road. I'm not going to let it end like that. So my thought process was get back at it. And thankfully, I'll repeat this a million times to everyone. Thankful for Jordan Kurtzy for being the old proverbial kick in the rear when you need a good friend. Basically calling me up and was like, "Hey, I got you a match. You're doing it." So it's a good adventure to go on right now.
Definitely. And Lewis, what do you have for Josh?
Oh man, I'm just honestly excited to have him in the cage. I know we were trying to organize something for the last CJJC event that didn't work out, but yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the card, Josh.
I'm happy to be on it, man. It's gonna be a fun night.
So, Josh, when you when you first got this opportunity, obviously, a big part of being a professional in combat sports and a prize fighter is obviously compensation with things. When the fight falls through in the fall, that obviously then this opens up an opportunity. Now you could have sponsors back in the mix, going out there with local representation and whatnot, being under a different banner from the UFC, and just a fun grappling show that you get the chance to go out there and do. So how has that allowed for you to kind of maybe branch out and make some new relationships or foster some opportunities there?
Well, I'll tell you what. I want to give a huge shout out to X Vapes, but first I'll tell you the story about how I came upon this. I was actually the last couple months playing in a volleyball league. I know, Josh Fremd playing volleyball. What? Well, fun fact for audience, my mom was a college volleyball coach. So I used to go and play with a bunch of college girls, and I'm actually really good at volleyball. I connected with a I connected with a group of individuals.
You've been on these airwaves with us for long enough. We knew as soon as you said volleyball, we knew that warm weather and short shorts was exactly what's on the big Jens's mind. Don't get it twisted.
I connected with a great group of people. And they work with a company called X Vapes. THC. I don't do the nicotine, but yeah, I was able to create a relationship with them, and they're going to have a table at the CJJC Cage event. We're going to have a whole corner panel decorated for them. So I want everyone to give them some time, go check out the table. Honestly, these are some of the best weed vapes that I don't know if I can say that on the airways. This is the best vape I've ever had. They taste great, phenomenal. So I want everyone to go ahead and give them a check.
There you have it right there. I mean, hey, sometimes it gives you the opportunity to get a little vitamins and back in the mix, hey?
The vitamins get you going right, you know.
Josh, I got to ask you, especially because we know your attachment with America's pastime. What are your thoughts, just right off the top, before we move along in the program here, as baseball season is kicked off with opening day coming to Denver this weekend, as far as Rockies home opener?
As far as Rockies home opener, it's baseball season, baby. I don't care too much for the Rockies, but I do love me some baseball going to the stadium. My biggest thought thus far from the season, torpedo bats. What are we going to do with the torpedo bats? Do we like them? Do we hate them? I definitely want to get my hands on one and go to the cages and see what all the fuss is about.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of like a long putter situation in golf. Like it's a technicality, right? Like it's still within the rules, but it's a little bit of it's a gray area, right?
I mean, there's no wrongdoing, and honestly, they look cooler.
It looks like a bowling pin out there. But
it does. It looks like a giant torpedo.
Torpedo. Hey, there we have it right there. Josh, Fremd, anybody that you want to give a shout out to on the way out here?
Yeah, X Vapes. Shout out X Vapes. I want to shout out you, Jordan Kurtzy, the MMA plug. I always love chatting it up with you guys. And Danny, I hope you're doing well, Danny.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, there he is.
Yes, sir. There we have it right there. The big wins, Josh Fremd. Catch him this weekend at the CJJC 25 GrappleCon, going down at the Stampede off Havana Street in Aurora. You can also check out the stream online for the show. We are moving along from that here, folks. But first and foremost, the sun is shining. The birds are chirping. The fresh cut grass paired with a hint of pine tar hits the nostrils with an all too familiar aroma. This Friday, April 4th, join us here at the number 38 for the Mile High Sports Rockies opening day watch party. There's going to be cold beer, hot food, incredible memories, and an incredible stage being set for the new season and memories to come. Come down and check out everything at the number 38 at 3560 Chestnut Place down in Rhino. Moving along from that, we're going to start into this week's CJJC 25 GrappleCon preview. In the main event, Lewis, we have a matchup between AJ Fletcher taking on Ben Bennett. This is UFC veteran AJ Fletcher taking on Ben Bennett, who is a veteran of the Contender Series as well as BYB bare knuckle boxing promotion. Couple of guys with a tremendous amount of combat sports experience and a little bit of a difference in terms of builds. Two welterweights, but one of them a little bit more long and lanky, one of them a very dense ball of muscle. What are your thoughts as matchmaker for CJJC? How did this come about? And when you envisioned this and this was on your war room board, what were the thoughts?
So, we always want to try to get big matches or big names if we can for these cards, specifically for the main event, co-main event, etc. We've been very fortunate with the relationship that we have with, Cody Brundage, Josh Fremd, some of the guys that we have on the card this coming weekend. Personally, I really like this match just because, it is Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Club. However, it is very much, a grappling, sensation that we have going on. We got wrestling matches going on. We got jiu-jitsu matches, gi, no gi, women's, men's. I mean, we're doing everything we can to kind of expose more than just jiu-jitsu in the grappling and in the martial arts community. But to have two MMA fighters, two veterans like these guys, well decorated veterans. It's awesome. It's an awesome experience to have, just to be in the same room with these guys, let alone to be able to watch them compete. And then more so for me, just having two MMA vets go at it in a grappling match in the cage. It's awesome. You know, you're going to see a whole lot of intensity in there. You're going to see a whole different game than what we're used to with jiu-jitsu, which can sometimes be very technical. It could be very precise, a little slower. I anticipate nothing but fireworks in this match for sure.
Certainly. You have two guys who want to go out there and entertain, want to go out there and have talked about, hey, let's use the cage. Let's have big slams. Let's put each other up in the air. Let's see who can accumulate more air miles, if you will. So I can't wait to see that matchup. Now, in our co-main event, who do we have for our co-main event?
Oh, gosh. We haven't organized the lineup entirely yet. So give me 1 second here.
Yes, about order still shifting because we did have a couple of change-ups. We did have an original order. Sometimes injuries happen, unfortunately, and things kind of shift up. But there's a lot of different matchups on this card that that we could just talk about overall ad nauseum here. I think that another matchup that is, for me, something that we have to talk about. And again, you talked about we have a multitude of grappling arts that's going to be on this show. It's a wrestling match. For me, it's going to be Alex Friedman taking on Bruno Nicoletti. I think that wrestling match is going to be high-paced action from start to finish. You have Bruno, who was an All-American in college, went on to then be a representative of the Brazilian Olympic team in wrestling. Then on the flip side, you have Alex Friedman, who was also a collegiate wrestler, who is then went on to be an MMA coach, an MMA wrestling coach, is a firefighter in the area. Two guys who have high-level training partners who have pushed them to the brink throughout the course of preparation for this camp. And obviously, Bruno is a known, recognized name and entity as far as what he brings on the wrestling side of things, as he was in our first match and was victorious in that affair. Sometimes when you have a tech fall, you don't have too many people come out and say, you know what, I want to go and jump in and put my name in the hat. Alex Friedman, on the flip side, said, I want all the smoke. So I can't give enough of a nod of respect to Coach Alex for saying, yeah, like I'll go out there. I'll take on the challenge.
I agree. I think, Bruno has been awesome to work with leading into, this last one that he did, as well as this one. He's a hell of an athlete, hell of a competitor for sure. So for anybody to just jump in there and want to go against him, it's much props to them. Friedman, I think that's just such an awesome matchup. They're both very decorated in wrestling, but they're also in a very powerful room, I guess you could say. Both of them train with, MMA, UFC elite guys. They're wrestling coaches. Like you mentioned, I think it's another one that's just going to be fireworks, nonstop action. I think Bruno has quite a test in front of him, but same thing with Friedman. So it's going to be, just a battle of these two brutes, seeing who's going to come out on top.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another couple of guys on the card that I think that, for me, anytime that they're in the mix of a grappling matchup, and one of them I feel like has crafted a signature style, in his demeanor and kind of the way that he presents himself to the crowd, but then B, in modalities, tactics, and routes to victory. And I want to give a shout out to Michael Eager. He comes out there and he just kind of has this like cold serial killer-esque type of demeanor about him, where he just kind of walk and just a cold blank stare, just those blue eyes just staring through your soul in the process. And then he's trying to take your leg home with him.
Yeah, I can't help but laugh because on the outside looking in, you could definitely see that out of Michael. He's a former training partner of mine, very good friend of mine. Realistically, he's just socially awkward. That's really what it comes down to. But he does have an intensity to him when he gets in there. He's a 2-0 with the CJJC right now, taking on a higher level competitor or higher belt competitor. Funny story too, a lot of people don't know, Michael is actually planning a move to Thailand. Just a very out of nowhere. I'm going to, change some things up. I decided to move out to Colorado for a change of pace, kind of grow up, so to speak. I guess that's what he's doing in Thailand. Pretty cool place to do that. So this is a big match for him. This is a big send-off match. I know he's got a big crowd coming to see him, and he's got his eyes on the prize with this one for sure. He wants to go out with a bang.
Awesome. There you have it right there. That's a reason to tune in its own respect there. Who are some people that you have your eyes on?
So one match in particular that I'm like really excited to see is going to be Maggie Kinnenberg. She's going to be going against Bree Rice. Maggie Kinnenberg being out of Imperial Jiu-Jitsu. We haven't yet been able to have them represent, their team on the show. So I'm really excited to have them. Maggie's a hell of a competitor. She's got great coaches behind her, but she's got a very, very tough match in Bree Rice coming out of Catalyst. Trevor Pahamas, they are no joke down there. But this match got a lot of social media attention from both competitors, both rooting for both fans rooting for their respective competitors, but a whole lot of action on social media. Very excited about that one. Also extremely excited about the match between Zach Medina out of Black Tie and Nick Lowry out of Subhounds, both coaches of their gyms, putting it all on the line to face each other. They have trained with each other before, both high-level brown belts. So I'm excited to see the technical chess match that's going to go on between these two. So yeah, those are my two matches that I'm definitely looking out for this coming weekend.
That's the one that I've gotten a lot of buzz for, people engaging with on social media when I've reshared to my story was like, oh, like I trained at this guy at XYZ open mats or went to their gym, whatever, at certain points. Like I'm excited to see this blah, blah, blah between these particular two. And yeah, I think that, we've mentioned obviously that we've had a couple of grapplers that are on the show who are mixed as far as their disciplines. They're mixed martial artists and they're competing in the realm of just grappling here. But I think it's also cool that we get high level specialists in the process too. It's a blend of both. We get to see kind of our own version of these UFC Fight Pass invitationals, if you will, the Fury Pro grappling cards, these shows that you're getting to see on Fight Pass that are showcasing some of your tops of the top grapplers, your Gordon Ryans, Nicky Rods, Kenyans, all of those top tier names of the upper echelon of specialists. But you're also getting to see, Sean Brady's going out there in a grappling match, or you see a match between Pat Downey and Andre Petrosky type of things. We're getting our version of that here on the local level, and I love it. I'm here for it.
Absolutely. I don't want to toot my own horn or nothing, but
that's what you're here for. You're supposed to toot your own horn. You're here to sell yourself, Lewis. This is what you are here for.
Yeah, dude. I have only been working with CJJC for the last 2 events now. But matchmaking with them has been incredible. Just being able to work with that organization, Kat and Steve, they're phenomenal. Working with you on commentary and things like that, I've learned so much. But being able to put together these matches, these exciting matches, and getting these names together, it's extremely exciting. Obviously, I want to get to that level, these UFC Fight Passes and these Fury cards. I want to get to that level, and I want to be able to get, those same kind of matches going up, the same kind of excitement. So yeah, man, I'm very excited to where we're headed.
Certainly. And a couple more that have to give a shout out to or give a mention to, that one of them has been on the program before. Got to show love and support the people who support you. A guy who will scream the praises and supports of anybody who he is behind at any chance that he possibly can. Another MMA fighter who does have a significant grappling background, but is, competing here directly in the grappling realm. And that's Super Jew Micah Haas. Micah Haas, he's got a tough matchup against Oliveira on the card, but again, Micah just being willing to say, hey, you know what? I'm kind of getting myself back into the mix after had to have a little situation with my hand pulled out of a fight, had an injury. I'm on the recovery. I'm planning on fighting again here in the near future. This is the right step for me to make sure that I'm back in place, to make sure that I'm, in line with the main thing being the main thing. But this is a quick little side quest. Let's go out there. Let's dance our way to the cage, as we are so customarily ready to be seen doing. I don't know what Mike is going to run for his song this time. You can usually always see him running Dancing Queen or whatever else out there, just living in his own world. smiling it up with that missing grill and just loving life. Gotta love you, Micah Haas.
Absolutely, I agree, Micah. Shout out to Micah Haas. I think it was a big risk for him jumping on this card, specifically because of his hand injury, which, you know, he said great recovery, very fast recovery. But like you mentioned, he is looking to fight in the future. He's actually planning on fighting not too long after our card. So you would think, you know, there's a lot of you know, there's injuries, there's all kinds of things that come into play preparing for this. So, you know, much respect to him for jumping in there. I know he was very adamant about just putting on a show. So I'm very excited to see him compete against Anthony. Anthony also very, very tough competitor. I've rolled with him a few times. So the guys both looking to put on a great show. So yeah, that's another one that's going to be a great match.
And speaking of putting on a show, we have Kenzie Cassell back on the card. Kenzie is fresh off of putting on an electrifying performance in her MMA affair against Les Johnson at Colorado Combat Club just a couple of weeks ago. You would have thought that she was the striking background person in that fight. She didn't really need to go into her tool belt of jiu-jitsu and grappling in that fight, but just someone she's on a roll right now. She's gone up against a couple of very tough opponents, and she didn't get the nod in some of these, but that experience against high-level people with someone who is still in her early 20s the way that she is, that is compounding interest type of experience. That's something that, you know, just say, for example, the matchup against Bobby on a couple of our cards ago, the growth that comes from a matchup like that, that's a slingshot effect. And then to go and say like, okay, well, that's one of the toughest, like meanest women on the planet. And I was able to go out there and I did well for myself at this stage of my growth and my development. Didn't get the win, but I am able to parlay the momentum from that going into this next competition, this next tournament, these next pro grappling cards, where then, okay, well, now my hand is getting raised. I'm going out there and I'm in a rubber match against someone who I've already competed multiple times against in multiple disciplines. Now we're settling the score in an MMA fight, and I go out there and I beat her in her game in the striking department. Oh, now I'm right back into the thick of things competing. That momentum, there's something to be said about that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She's, I mean, no surprise to me there. She's an extremely hard worker, that girl, and she's got a great attitude, man. I think, especially when she loses, you know, she's right back in the gym. She was actually one of the first people when we posted about the card. She was one of the first people to message me, let me know she already sent in an application, let me know what's good. So she was ready to compete as soon as possible. She had a fight scheduled. She won that fight in dominant fashion, and then was just ready for the next one. So I'm really excited to see her continue to progress, not just with CJJC, but more so just in her martial arts career. She's very young. She's very, very talented. And yeah, man, the sky's the limit for, you know, for her or really anybody in that stage of their martial arts career.
Absolutely. You said it perfectly. Sky's the limit there for Kenzie Cassell. Can't wait to see what comes forward there. Just a little bit of itinerary notes for the weekend, ladies and gentlemen. On Friday, the weigh-ins are going to be going down at the Ugly Dog Sports Cafe. You can check those out in person, or you can check those out on the CJJC YouTube page. On Saturday, we are cracking the doors at the Stampede at noon. First matches on the early prelims are going to kick off at 12:30. Again, you could buy tickets right now as we speak online at jujitsuclub.co, or if you know anybody in the jiu-jitsu community, those grapplers still do have tickets in hand. You could also pick those up at the door. You could check out the stream as well online for the card this weekend. One last shout out before we hit to this UFC preview and then go 3 rounds. You're my boy, Blue. Got Blue Hernandez on the card too as well. So shout out to Blue, a creative in the community who is getting in the mix, competing. Love to see it, man. I wish nothing but the best for you getting after it this weekend. Let's get after it, Blue.
Hell yeah, Blue.
Moving along to this weekend's UFC Fight Night preview. Don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this, just based off of a lot of promotion for the card for CJJC this weekend, but a couple of matchups that we definitely want to talk about and hit in the main event. It's a featherweight showdown that's going down between the former interim title challenger Josh Emmett. He's taken on the unbeaten Lerone Murphy. Josh Emmett, at this point, I think it's pretty easy to figure out what he wants. But stopping it is the issue. If he lands that overhand right, you're going to go to a place where time doesn't exist. The issue is, I just think at this point, everyone knows it, and his game isn't necessarily the deepest outside of that. He's kind of in a couple of the matchups, especially where he's lost, he more or less goes to the well too often. He's just spamming that overhand right. And if you could take away the lead leg, take away a little bit of his wrestling, that he's definitely a very good wrestler, being at alpha male for as long as he has, is a decisionator, if you will, a point fighter who is crafty and finds ways to win, has gotten into a couple of dog fights and has dug deep the way that Murphy has, but can he keep the Revolution bump and NorCal kid at bay? And can he keep that right hand off of his shin?
Yeah, that's going to be the question for sure. I know that Bryce Mitchell knockout is probably one of the scariest knockouts that I've ever seen. God, that's just terrifying to see that kind of power out of somebody, especially somebody at 145. But yeah, I feel like, that's the wrestler's game, is definitely being able to put together your overhand right with your lead takedown and being able to mix that very well. Obviously, the Team Alpha Male being heavy wrestler based, they all have that in their game plan. They all mix it up pretty well. Like you said, the question is Murphy going to be able to avoid that? I guess it kind of just depends on whether or not Josh is going to be able to keep the same pace for the entire fight, or if he's going to burn his wad out early on. Because if that is the case, anybody who's able to grind it out in decisions, they're going to be technical enough to stay out of range. They're going to be technical enough to outpoint you and go away with the nod.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think that if you're looking at taking a flyer, and if you're feeling a little bit froggy, I'm sure that you could shot value out there amongst some of the books and figuring out what the Josh Emmett KO is, especially a sub 2.5 round KO. I think that might be something where you find a value play out there. Not exactly sure. Not someone that's heavy on in the gambling side of things, but I know a lot of you out there are. Maybe it's something that you could go out there and up your bag for the weekend. Moving along from that fight, again, not a lot of time to talk about the UFC card before we hit 3 rounds and are out for the week, but cannot go by without showing love to another friend of the program, Colorado Combat Club alumni. He's going to be making his UFC debut this weekend, and that's Luis Grim-Gurley. Luis is a Denver native. He's a Sheridan High School graduate, won a state championship there, went on to wrestle initially at Colorado School of Mines, then ended up getting a better offer and transferred to Adams, finished out his wrestling career there before entering the workforce. Graduates, gets out, decides to join the gym, right down the street from where he grew up, which originally, he's since gone on and he's with a group of his own now, but originally he started off at Factory X, which was his neighborhood gym just from where he grew up. Sheridan High School is right down the street. He joined just to kind of stay in shape and be in the mix of, martial arts, blah, 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 so on and so forth, as so many people, former athletes, all that do. After many a nights of just conversations, if you've ever trained, how you have those powwows on the mats afterwards, if you will, you have those late night sessions where you're just BSing for a while. And after a couple of years of convincing, kind of like Josh said, I guess I kind of have a quality about myself of poking and prodding. He decided to take the leap and kick the tire on fighting. Guys, I told you initially when we had him on, when Crux ever been in the mix or around, he could tell you. I knew from the very beginning that Luis Grim-Gurley had a bright future in fighting, ever before he was even on the fight team. I mean, we competed in the first fight to win tournaments that we did were the same ones together. I remember Luis's first match, he ended up getting DQ'd because he took a kid down too hard and they called it a slam. So like some of those just, kind of ticky-tack jiu-jitsu rules, but then he went on and ran the table for the rest of the tournament. And from then on, he just competition bug caught, and then that progressed into fighting. Luis went on to an unblemished amateur career, all knockouts, then quickly amassed a 10-0 record in MMA. That's a guy who's a grappling background who just chooses utter brutal violence and putting you in the most uncomfortable pace and positions possible. He's a special fighter. He's cerebral. He's intelligent. But again, his penchant for violence is what makes him that much more of a threat when it actually comes time to get down in the octagon. And that's because he is smart enough to figure out what your game is from an IQ level, but he's also tough enough and enough of a brute to where sometimes he can say, all right, you might do that well, but I just don't care. I'm just going to march right through that, and I'm going to be a little tank. If you've never seen Luis out there, ladies and gentlemen, just from if you were to take his silhouette, he's a flyweight silhouette comparison of Yoel Romero. There's no neck.
No
All
question.
muscle.
No question. He is an absolute beast. To say that he fights at 125 is crazy. It's part of one of the reasons why I've stayed away from fighting, just to avoid guys like that. I've had the pleasure of being able to roll with him before. Celine Haga, who I've trained with on numerous occasions, was always telling me like, oh, you need to roll with Luis. You need to roll with Luis. Got a chance to roll with him, and he absolutely ragdolled me. So there was no question who was the better grappler that day. But I didn't know then, that his real capabilities in the ring we're gonna show it in terms of his knockout power, his striking. I mean, that dude is scary, very scary.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Celine, my old roommate. Again though, I've sang Luis's praises from the top rope from the very beginning and at every chance that I possibly can, and he has followed through and done everything to possibly impress and then go above and beyond expectations that may have been forecasted for him. So much to the point of in one of his fights in the LFA, and when the LFA people were sold on him early on in his amateur career, he's screaming over a man while he is beating the life out of him saying, "Give me your soul." Like, that is just a demented person who gets off on hurting people, and that is a scary man in the cage. Love you, Luis Grimgoulet. I wish nothing but the best for you this weekend. It's a tall test, literally, in O'Day Osborne, one of the taller fighters on the UFC roster. But again, Luis is going to find his way on the inside, and I think that you all will get to see something that we have all known for a little while. Get your popcorn ready, folks. Moving along now to 3 rounds to close out the hour. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards. First round. What do we have?
In a shocking revelation, Conor McGregor all but confirmed his retirement during a presser last week. Were you surprised?
To me, this is kind of, it's something that we've already kind of thought for a long time that he's done, or we've spoke to that it's done. But for Conor to actually publicly acknowledge it, I think that was more of the shock than anything. The thought that he's done, I'm past that. It's him publicly acknowledging it and then kind of stating that he's, his heart bleeds for Ireland. And, his heart's bleeding for his country and he wants to get into politics. Except right now, I think that it's the worst time for him to do so or to try to go be presidential. I think the best thing Conor could do is just kind of fade off for a little bit. Yes, retire, get officially away from the fight game, fade away for a little bit, get yourself out of the spotlight, stop being so coked out and liquored up at every public appearance, just speaking nonsense, going on and on, just sweating bullets at 7 a.m., like those sorts of things. Remove yourself and let some time go by. And then if you want to get into politics, then go through the full PR revamp. But right now, I think the kitchen is way too hot for him to get into that world. And if he thought that fighting was kind of a dirty realm or a spot where he was potentially a target and being attacked by media and so on and so forth, or the opponents, brother, that is nothing compared to the mudslinging that goes on in politics.
I agree. He's got his work cut out for sure. I think, I don't necessarily believe he's done. I think maybe done with the UFC. I don't anticipate seeing him anytime soon. But BKFC, they have a lot going on right now. He has hinted about making some kind of, comeback or, some kind of appearance in the ring there. I wouldn't be surprised if he did do that. But I
You have
wouldn't
to
be
get
surprised.
contractual clearance from the UFC, though. He still has two fights left on his contract with the UFC.
I think he's got the money to buy out of that. You know what I mean? It's been done before.
That would be
I
the
could
only
see-
way.
Yeah, I could see it happening again. But also too, like you said, Jordan, I would like to actually just maybe see him disappear for a minute. You know, rebuild mentally, just as a human, dude. He's definitely been through a mess. You know, he's made a lot of bad choices, and I think maybe it's time to kind of clean that up, away from the cameras, away from the attention.
Agreed.
Zack Snyder is set to write and direct a new UFC movie titled Brawler. This is supposed to be a project in official partnership with the UFC and Ring Magazine. Your thoughts?
It kind of rings a little bit of Ready to Rumble with WCW back in the late 90s. You know, a wrestling movie that was an official partnership with the promotion. It's going to give, potentially maybe a push to some people within the brand. And, that might be a bit of a hyperbolic example, but I don't know. I think that every MMA movie so far, when it comes to actually capturing the reality of it all, sucks. Like, there's elements of them that are great, but there's also parts of them that are so far from what would ever be the realistic thing that would actually happen. Warrior was probably one of the closest, but the fact that they had a tournament where you're fighting full rules, full contact MMA on back-to-back days, there's not a snowball shot in hell that you would ever be able to do that based on the damage accumulation. Like, if you did it maybe all in one night, well, hey, yeah, you run the risk that injuries can happen, but that's potentially realistic. Back-to-back days, though, the entire plot line or the model of that gets blown up. Just, yeah, like I say, maybe some of those things get cleaned up, that they're corny and they're cheesy, but the Never Back Down series, there's some good points, there's some not so good points. I liked them.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Never Back Down, the first one, is actually one of my most favorite MMA movies. It's probably the first MMA movie that I saw that kind of sparked the interest.
It's also a first look into how toxic Amber Heard is.
No, I think that movie, just like you said, with any other of these MMA movies, they're all cheesy. But that probably did the best job of just kind of trying to make a basic storyline, the classic tale of, not being able to beat up a bully. You go to do martial arts, you beat up the bully at the end. But then you have these other movies, that were all very tap out sponsored. I can't even think of the names, but you had those movies with Rampage Jackson and George St. Pierre. And, you would think that those kind of had given them the same effect that maybe this movie is supposed to do, in terms of exposure and things like that. But really all it did is just make people nod, at the cheesiness of these movies.
Here Comes the Boom is what you're thinking.
Exactly. Here Comes the Boom. Halle Berry was just in an MMA movie, which I heard wasn't bad. But yeah, realistically, I think there's so much that goes into being a martial artist, a fight camp, training, the lifestyle, the dieting, etc., that can't be put in an hour and 20.
Yeah, I think Kingdom, if you want an actual cinematic depiction of it, the Frank Grillo TV series, that's a better reflection of it if you want a deeper look from a cinematic level. But that's a whole different conversation.
Bellator heavyweight champ Ryan Bader was granted his release from the PFL and is now a free agent. Do you see a UFC return for the now 41-year-old Bader?
In almost any other circumstance, I would say no. However, right now, the heavyweight division is in such a desperate state. They're in such a just, I guess, thirsty mode to have anybody of interest or halfway competent capability. Again, we've spoken about it for the last few months on this program about how the UFC has literally 30 heavyweights on the roster. 30. So that means half of them are ranked and you're considering them a top guy in the world. That is a very unskilled bunch for the most part. And it's not just the UFC, it's widespread collectively across all promotions that I don't think that there are in especially in comparison to other weight classes, I don't know that you can competently fill a top 15 rankings of really legit heavyweights right now. Like, again, if you're talking, especially look at it in yesteryear, from the SEG era to the golden era MMA to the reign in, and some of it is obviously, performance based with some stuff, but there were just eras of the heavyweight division that, man, like, that's what made fans tune in. You gravitated toward watching some of those heavyweights. The Pride era of yesteryear, the heavyweights that you had during the run of Kane with Brock, with JDS, with Bigfoot Silva, Mark Hunt, with all of some of those wars of the heavyweight division. Fabricio Verdum in the mix, Stipe, even the mid-tier heavyweights were vastly superior to the large portion of the majority of the division that we have today. And yeah, I mean, I would say, again, in most cases, you don't see Bader come back. Right now, to maybe halfway have somewhat of a bit of a name value and a shot of life in the arm of the division, maybe you roll the dice on a 41-year-old. Who knows? You use him to build someone's name. I don't know.
I agree. I don't, I'm not sure off the top of my head how old John is, but I'm sure he's up there too. If you remember way back when John beat Bader for the number one contender spot to be able to get the title shot against Shogun way back whenever that was. So the matchmaker in me is definitely like, okay, I could sell this. However, realistically, I wouldn't be even remotely excited to see Bader back in the UFC, although I do think it does add to what you were saying, that element of just being able to expand on the heavyweight division. I think it's very difficult to find good heavyweights, especially when you have maybe 3 in a room at a gym. So maybe he's the top dog at the gym, but then you put him in a weight class full of those top dogs at the gym, and it's kind of difficult to see when they're all battling out. And there's really only one top dog at that weight class right now, and that's John Jones.
Yeah, and provided that John would get through Tom Aspinall, I can understand from a business and from a matchmaking standpoint where you could potentially say, all right, well, Bader left the UFC, goes on the detour. He did get knocked out by Renan Fajeda, so that does have to be, noted as far as PFL like titles or whatever. That's part of why he's no longer with them, but left Bellator as the champion. So you can say leaves the UFC, an organization that went defunct, is the de facto champion of that. You maybe kind of sell it, but it's the same storyline of him fighting Stipe in a way. Of you're fighting another, at that point, he would be a minimum of 42 years old. As far as Bader goes, you're talking about, is that a matchup that really kind of sells? I don't know. And I think just as a whole, one way or the other, if John gets through Tom, John's retiring. I don't know what there is for Bader aside from potentially being fodder and building the name of maybe a couple of other guys. GFL is maybe the move for him, or however that whole donkey show and dumpster fire goes about. But just like that, though, folks, we are all out of time. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in with us each and every week for this original combat sports programming. I want to thank you to Luis Rodriguez for joining us here on the program today. Luis, where can people follow you again?
Lujitsu on Instagram. That's Lujitsu for life.
You could also, I also want to say thank you to Josh Fremd for hopping on the show with us today, talking about his matchup this weekend, where you can check us out at the Stampede for CJJC 25 GrappleCon. We want to thank Danny Bailey behind the boards for us, holding it down. Thank you to the Mile High Sports crew. Next week, we'll see you same time, same place. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.